Excellent. Welcome to tonight's Pension Fund meeting. My name is Councillor Ross Melton, Chair of this committee. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping points to cover. Please can officers introduce themselves before speaking for the first time. Can I remind everyone to use the microphones in front of them and the speaker button. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. By taking part, you are consenting to be recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting. Please leave via the staff fire exit, which is behind me on my right. Officers will direct you to the correct assembly point on Riverside Gardens. First, item 1, appointment of vice chair. Do members agree with my nomination of Councillor Adrian Pascu-Tilbury as vice chair for 2025-2026? Agreed. Fabulous. Appointment of co-opted members, item 2. Do members agree with the nomination to appoint Michael Adam and Peter Parkin as co-opted members for 2025-2026?
Agreed.
Fabulous. Apologies for absence. I note that we've had one apologies for absence from Councillor Pascu-Tilbury. Any further apologies? I believe Mike Adam hopes to join us remotely shortly. Item 4, can I invite members to declare any interests? No? Excellent. Item 5, minutes from our previous meeting. Can I ask for a proposer and a seconder from our previous minutes? Thank you, Adam Peter. Thank you, Laura. Pressing on. An item not on the agenda, but I would like to make a short remark in response to the letter and petition received by this committee from Union. You'll forgive me for reading. I'd like to thank our members of the public outside for submitting their letter and petition, which includes a range of concerns beyond the scope of the LBHF pension fund. Unfortunately, as this letter and petition was submitted late outside of the usual process, we cannot permit speakers to this public speakers for this item at this time. However, I'd like to take the opportunity to provide further information on specific points raised to that are salient to the LBHF pension fund. I'm grateful that so many union members and LBHF pension fund members share my belief in the power of pensions to make positive change. As all attendees should be aware, we have one duty for which I'm personally and legally responsible, is the fiduciary responsibility to support our pension fund members, ensuring that they can have a safe and secure retirement. However, where this does not conflict with our primary duty, this committee has repeatedly prioritized investments that make a positive global impact. This is illustrated by an industry-leading commitment to decarbonising the pension fund. LBHF, as many attendees will be aware, has the second smallest carbon exposure of any UK LGPS at less than 0.01%, only behind those dastardly Orcadians. The members of this committee are strongly supportive of the UK government's stance on Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza, including the Prime Minister's statement on Monday, 19th of May, calling for a halt to military operations in Gaza, spotlighting the level of human suffering in the region as intolerable, and calling for immediate distribution of food aid to a starving Gazan population. Furthermore, we are supportive of the UK government's decision to restrict weapons exports and to impose economic sanctions upon senior Israeli government ministers. We welcome the UK government's decision not to support Israel's expansion of the conflict with further attacks in Iran. For those of you who reviewed the minutes from our previous meeting on Tuesday, 26th of November, you will have seen that the committee is directly addressing the fund's exposure to defence stocks in response to a further public question, which account for 3.5% of the fund's exposure, or around £48.1 million out of a £1.3 billion fund. It is noteworthy that this includes a £15,000 investment in Elbit Systems, which is only uncovered recently. All of these investments are held by the pool, the London Civ, which the LBHF pension fund is required to participate within. It is worth spotlighting that in 9 months' time, Responsibility for all LBHF pension fund investment allocations will be centralised within the CIF. Within this changing geopolitical climate, the ethics of investment in UK defence is complex and evolving. However, the process that this committee began last year with the review of our defence investment exposure means that we are already in a strong position to review the 54 million in investments cited by Unison this evening. This includes 34 individual stocks that have been collated by the Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions National Committee, which they assert are supportive of the Israeli occupation. However, the participation of some of these organizations is disputed. The LBHF pension fund remains committed to ensuring that we are investing for good, continually reviewing and enhancing the ethics of our investments. While I can understand the urgency of some of the members of the public's calls for action, it would be inappropriate for the LBHF Pension Fund Committee to make a decision affecting the pensions of our 17,000 members without the adequate information. Our legal duty is clear. We must think of our pensioners first. However, I'm pleased to spotlight that we're already taking action. We have already begun the process of rapidly reviewing our investments, updating our ESG investment statement to ensure that we have the right balance of fiduciary and ethical responsibilities, and using our influence as one of the 33 LGPS funds within the London CIV to make the case for ethical investment. I've previously met with members of the LBHF Climate Commission to discuss decarbonising our fund investment allocations, and I'm delighted to extend the same invitation to any members of the LBHF Pension Fund or Unison members to discuss their concerns and respond to their questions. I absolutely believe that we share the same values and are keen to align our actions. Thank you for the time on that. I would now like to suggest that we move on to item 6, Aberdeen Multi-Sector Private Credit. This includes an exempt element, so I will ask Phil Triggs to introduce the public elements before we move to a privatisation.
Thank you, Chair. So Aberdeen have been invited along to tonight's meeting. It's a result of notice from the investment house that the fund has been gated in advance of the 1st of October 2025 dealing date, and this has been triggered by redemptions exceeding 10% of the net asset value over the prior 12 months. So this withdrawal of investments is by 3 corporate defined benefit pension schemes. Aberdeen has stated that the redemptions are not driven by changes in investment strategy, but they are due to concerns about liquidity status of those particular funds. In terms of Hammersmith and Fulham's exposure, which is quite sizable, there is some concern as to the future viability of the portfolio. There is an opportunity to hand notice in for Hammersmith and Fulham's own withdrawal by a deadline of 30th of June, so in a few days' time. Aberdeen have been invited along to state what the position is, provide assurance if they can, and it will be for the committee to make a decision on the future of the allocation. I'm happy to hand over to my colleagues from ISIO if there's anything further to add.
Probably not at this stage. I think it's probably hear from Aberdeen, and then we can discuss it further in the private section.
Okay, I think that's over to us then. So firstly, thank you very much for inviting us to present. I think I'll do some introductions if that's all right. Okay. Do you want us to go to the presentation then? Okay, so I'm Ewan Baird. I'm a director in the UK Institutional Division at Aberdeen Investments, and I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues, with Martin on my right.
Martin Barnwell, I'm the Head of Commercial Real Estate Debt at Aberdeen.
Marianne Zangle, I'm the Deputy Global Head of Fixed Income and the Head of ESG for Fixed Income.
Excellent. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Can I ask members to agree a resolution to move to a closed session? Agreed. Excellent. And if we press on to item 8, key performance indicators. Thank you for waiting so patiently, Eleanor. Please, if you could introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Eleanor Dennis, Head of Pensions. So this first paper sets out the key performance indicators for the pension administration provided by LPPA for the last 12 months, so the period April 2024 to March 25, sorry. So they processed over 6,000 cases, an increase on the previous year, with death and retirement cases amongst the case types with the highest volumes. All but one case type maintained KPIs of above target of above 95%. I welcome any questions.
Any questions from members on the KPIs? Can I ask, if there are no questions, can I ask members to note the report? Fabulous. And if we can press on, staying with you, Eleanor, on item 9.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper sets out a summary of key activity in pension administration operations for the Hammersmith and Fulham Fund. So in terms of the triennial valuation progress, LPPA have had to push back on the data submission a couple of weeks to the 11th of July, but the actuaries, Hymans, have confirmed that they don't anticipate that this will have any impact on the current timetable, with a view to updating committee in September, October time. There has also been an audit of LPPA's administration service, by which it was very successful. It's the first sort of service audit that they have carried out by KPMG, with only 2 recommendations surrounding improvement in client meetings. So a very satisfactory outcome. There, in terms of communications, I have updated the internal intranet site to highlight scamming information, so highlighting and signposting to the FCA register and the Pension Scams Action Group. There for those that are looking to retire shortly. And in terms of legislative updates, we've got an open consultation on access and fairness. So that highlights potentially improving survivors' benefits and cohabiting partners' rights, as well as addressing the gender pension gap by improving maternity leave and making that automatically pensionable. I welcome any questions.
On the third item that you mentioned there, Eleanor, can you take us through what our proposed response to the consultation is?
It's thank you, Chair. It's a very straightforward consultation. It has a number of questions about each specific element of the current LGPS rules that are not in line with equalisation. So it simply asks, is it a good idea, and do you foresee any administrative challenges to this change? The consensus on, certainly on the officers groups that I'm part of, is very much, this is, you know, all very much in line with what should be happening. It's very good that it's getting high profile, and the current government are keen to there's been statements by respective key personnel that they're keen to address these issues and give that across the board, hardworking civil servants, where there are these anomalies in the current rules, and address those by providing equalisation and a fair and access to all. So certainly even with the Fit for Future consultation, there is an element of that which is very much about addressing member outcomes, and this is a continuation of that conversation.
Thank you, Eleanor. Any further questions or observations? Peter, please.
Is it noted that complaints are falling? Is that correct?
Yes, Peter, they are.
And that's excellent. That's excellent. Well done to the LPPA. That's just a comment, really, Chair.
Well, and a very welcome comment and a congratulations to the team. Can you take us through the KPMG service audit?
So David Hughes, Director of Audit, Fraud, Risk and Insurance. So as a provider, LPPA will have commissioned KPMG to carry out an internal audit of their systems of control. So this comes in two phases. One is looking at the design of the controls that LPP have in place, and the other is about aspects about the effectiveness of those controls. And this is where they've focused on the effectiveness of those controls this time around. As Eleanor said, there are a couple of minor recommendations that have been made, which look at how they deal with client meetings. Having seen the report myself, I'm satisfied that it gives us assurance as an internal audit, Hammersmith and Fulham, that a good piece of work was done by KPMG that covers the controls that LPPA have in place, and it's a good outcome from that first audit.
And sorry, Chair, if I can just add, I will share that with the committee outside of the meeting for reference.
You anticipated my question, and thank you for that summary, David. It's very satisfying to hear LPPA getting such a clean bill of health. Any further questions or observations? Please, Adam Peter.
Thank you very much. Can I thank you very much for these reports? And also I echo what's just been said about the complaints falling. That's positive. I just wanted to ask something about the pensions dashboard. Can you just remind me what that is? And it's not going live, is it? For just tell me what's happening there, please.
Thank you, Councillor. So the pensions dashboard is a government initiative in which there's a platform that any members of the public can access their pension information. There's been an initiative for all providers to have in place the data, that connectivity, if you like, and ours is, the date is October 2025. So LPPA are very much on board with having everything aligned by that date. So we're confident that they have that in place. However, what the government hasn't done is confirmed when the go live date will be for the general members of the public to start using it. That could be many years in the future. And so the focus has purely been about data, connectivity. There are still some issues regarding connectivity of ABC providers. So our ABC provider is Scottish Widows. How will members be able to access that? Because that's by a large insurance company. Will that work alongside the normal pension platform for LGPS? But the same applies for any other pension provider. So that's where we're at. It's a continuous conversation because it's up to the government as to when that will go live for the public. And then it's about managing the numerous queries that will generate, having capacity to manage that both for LPPA, but also us internally in terms of corrections to individuals' data that will go retrospectively back for some time. So it's a huge exercise. It has been done quite successfully in Northern Europe. And that's where the government have got that incentive and that idea from, and want to roll that out in the UK in order for individuals to have more control, more visibility of the pensions. There's a huge sort of black hole, if you like, on lost pensions, where people have worked multiple jobs. They've forgotten 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that they do have pension rights. And this is a platform that would allow them to have that visibility and keep up to date and make informed choices as to their pension provision in later life, as opposed to relying on the state pension.
Can I ask members to note the report? Thank you. If we can switch back to you, Phil, for item 10, draft pension statement of accounts. If you hold fire for a moment. Yeah, would you like to join us down here?
I'm not sure it fits in the agenda.
Climate risk reporting.
So essentially, it's a request for information from the investment consultants, perhaps the actuaries, on the advice they give you for our conclusion of climate risk reporting within triangle valuation section and the TCFD. I've emailed you a request now.
I think I've seen that.
I'm certain that lodging a request here makes it formal enough with greater impetus without having to go
Well, I very much appreciate the question. As you've emailed it directly to me, I will endeavour to answer it as soon as possible. I hope that's satisfactory.
Yes.
We're not, sadly, not equipped to answer it immediately.
Lodge the request for the information from the third parties. And if that's handled by the email, you need to be here, then we need to make a formal request.
Phil?
Chair, as part of the actuarial valuation, the triennial valuation that's currently being carried out, there is provision in that process whereby the actuary will make comment on the climate change implications of the valuation and the future contribution rates. So that will form part of the actuarial report, which the committee will receive later this year and will be made public.
Absolutely.
I understand that's the communication with the audience of the webinar they gave to see on the LPGS report valuation. I'm concerned about the level of risk present, awareness of risk reporting. I'm aware of that.
Thank you very much for the question. As I say, I'll respond to your email in consultation with support of officers. If I've understood you correctly, the question is less about the whether climate mitigation is considered. It is the quality and weighting given to that consideration.
In essence, it's moving away from the conventional which I'm unaware of how it rolls into section 13. I've seen section 13 previous years now. Yes. And so how it relates to the TCFD reporting, which is set by statutory obligation. So it's going to be much more impactful.
Well, thank you very much for your question. And as I say, I apologise that I'm not able to answer it immediately. However, I will endeavour to as soon as possible. And I'd like to invite you to join us when for our public meeting when we do go through the triennial review. Excellent. So then resuming with item 10, if you wouldn't mind, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. So this report concerns the first draft of the pension fund accounts for 24-25. They were completed on time. We're indebted to my colleague Sean Cogley for their compilation completion. They've been forwarded to the external auditor for external audit. That's Grant Thornton, who actually has started work on this audit some 2 weeks earlier than planned, which is a great thing to be able to report, because normally there is some inherent delay, but in this case it's an early start. Which
I don't know what you're implying about the audit industry.
We're very happy about that. So the draft set of accounts is set out for the committee's comment, or I obviously can take any questions. They are pre-audit, so the auditor will do substantial work in terms of the checking and whether they form a true and fair view of the financial state. So those accounts, in conjunction with the notes provided, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Can I invite questions from them? If there are no questions, Peter, please.
Phil, thank you. Is it the case? Well, it is the case that that fees have been reduced. Is Is that where we are, where we're looking at the background and all this? Am I in the right section? Agenda item 10? You seem to have a reduced amount of fees. Is that a good thing, or?
Yes, in terms of those fees, they will vary from year to year, so that the makeup of fees is that there's a performance element included where a particular return has been achieved, whereby a performance management fee is payable. Then that will vary from year to year if that has to be included. So there are various factors involved. Mostly the fee will depend on the valuation at the year end, and then obviously the number of basis points that the fee is subject to, which calculation will be carried out as to the fee. And obviously with a rising asset value, you're going to get a slightly rising fee level from year to year.
So is that good for the fund? Is that healthy for this particular fund? Is that what it's saying? 'Cause I wasn't sure if it was saying that's a good thing or just a situation that occurs.
Well, there is a drive towards lower fees, and that's the whole point of pooling. And as we're moving more and more assets across to the pool for their management, with a greater bank of assets, then the pool can negotiate lower fee rates. So ideally, there you will see a reduction in that fee level over the years as we progress.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you.
Is there any further questions? Sorry, thank you, Liam. If there are no further questions, can I ask members to approve the draft statement of accounts? Thank you very much. Staying with you, Phil, on item 11, London Civ Regulatory Capital.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a call by the London Civ for additional regulatory capital. It's not a huge amount that's involved, but obviously with 32 client funds, then if you multiply that figure by 32, it does result in a reasonably substantial amount. It arises really as a result of the greater amount of assets that the pool will be managing as we move towards this regulatory regime.
The flip side of Peter's question.
Sorry?
The flip side of Peter's question.
Yes, that's right. And in terms of compliance with the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authorities, the rules and regulations that they stipulate in terms of having regulatory capital on the balance sheet to support that management of assets, then we've been asked to stump up this figure. I've taken a deliberate policy decision to take this approval to each of the committees of the Tri-Borough. So Hammersmith and Fulham tonight, Westminster tomorrow, and Kensington and Chelsea the week after next. So we are the last three authorities to provide that approval. The other 29 have already given their say-so, and they're happy. So it's a reasonably straightforward case for acceding to this request.
Thank you, Phil. Am I correct in assuming from your comment there that the other 29 boroughs did not seek committee approval?
I think some of them have. The ones where they haven't, they've just taken a Section 151 officer engaging with the chairman to get that approval quickly. My insistence to the Civ was I need to get this past my committee.
I appreciate the consideration. Do members have any questions about this additional allocation? No? Are we resolved then to approve the additional payment to London Civ? Excellent, thank you very much. Taking us into the station then, Phil, with item 12, quarterly update.
Thank you, Chair. So the report sets out the information concerning the returns over the quarter, supplemented by the comprehensive supplements with ISIO as the appendix. There's further information within the report as to the government's publication of its draft pensions bill, and also the response to the previous consultation on LGPS being fit for purpose. So we do have two very important documents, the draft bill and the consultation. Those two documents have to be read in conjunction with each other, because the whole picture emerges as a result of combining the two together. If you read just one without the other, you get a bit of a fragmented picture. So that information is very important. I think that the main messages are, firstly, on the dissolution of two pools. So of the 8 pools that previously existed, 2 have been asked to dissolve, and that is the Access pool and the Brunel pool, which basically forms all of the southern counties in England, right across the southern coast, up as far as Norfolk on the right-hand side, and up as far as Northamptonshire on the other side. So the whole swathe of southern counties basically are without a home at the moment, and required on an individual basis to try and find an alternative pool out of the other 6. So my sympathy goes out to them, because that, in terms of current workload and all of the things that are going on at the moment, to have to find another pool is just mind-boggling. But it's the wish of the government in terms of not having faith in the future of those 2 and requiring them to be dissolved. So there's not much of a retaliatory process by which the 21 can appeal against that they don't really hold any cards as to insisting on the status quo. So that is it's a very difficult scenario. In terms of how this draft bill is looking to go, and obviously the consultation process, the government will have the power to dictate basically as to which fund is in which pool, and that is quite a considerable power, which will be a statutory power, that it can provide a command as to membership of a pool of any particular LGPS fund in the country. Not just that, but also to keep power, again, as a statutory power to command any pool to do its bidding in terms of future investment, and also to have a power to command any administering authority to invest in any which way that the government prescribes. So this is not generally understood by most of practitioners I'm speaking to, but that power is there. The bill will go through the parliamentary process. We're expecting the House of Lords to be all over this in terms of how on earth can you expect to hold that power, and for the future it's a matter of when and not if those powers will be implemented. I'd be interested to hear the views of Izio and Sam on this particular aspect. Other aspects in terms of legacy assets, we've already talked about that, the power of the pool to dictate as to how those portfolios will be run in the future. And then also with regard to future decisions on active and passive management, that will again will be a pool prerogative in terms of whether portfolios are run on an active or passive basis. Now, that is probably the most insistent thing in terms of the previous responses of the administrative authorities to the consultation. That was the thing that most authorities were saying, we need to keep that power of decision to ourselves. We want to decide as to active or passive, but it will be a pooling responsibility. Now, I've already mentioned that in terms of the legislation, the pools will have to, obliged to act in accordance with our preferences, but ultimately they have the final say-so. So I'm willing just to halt there. If members want to ask any questions on this particular legislative process and if the advisors can advise any further.
Shall we take the advisor view first and then questions, or if you want to?
Thank you, Phil. Could you just explain the timeline there as you see it for the legislation then?
Right. Well, the first milestone is the royal assent of the bill as it goes through Parliament. Obviously, there's the first reading, second reading, committee stage. Then it goes to House of Lords, first reading, second reading, committee stage. Then it goes back to the House of Commons for final vote. Then it goes for royal assent. The idea was that a royal assent would be achieved by the autumn. What would follow after that would be the draft regulations, which dictate the way that we govern the LGPS, draft regulations and final regulations in time of the 31st of March 26. The government has now indicated it doesn't think it will get the royal assent in time for an autumn royal assent. So therefore, everything's going to get pushed back. So the likelihood this is going to get pushed into 2026, either summer or autumn, in terms of an effective date. 31st of March is the target. We don't think they can produce that.
Yeah, so I'll keep it pretty brief. In terms of the final report, I would summarize as saying there wasn't any surprises in there. So the consultation process was done. Everything that was in the consultation was pushed through in the final report. So no surprises from that. But I think that's not to underplay the size of the structural change. I think Phil's hinted to, but it will become a new operating environment for LGPS funds. It's huge structural change. There's the challenges and the conflicts and the unpicking that comes with that. So that's something to keep in mind. The one thing I was surprised that didn't change, didn't get pushed back on more was the date. So Phil mentioned March 26. I would have expected, given the timescales, that to get pushed out. But there was a firm line to say that's the one we're working to. As Phil mentions, do they achieve it or not? I don't know. But that kind of is the kind of line in the sand that everyone's working to. And then on the kind of balance of power points, I'd agree completely with what Phil said. So there's the element of the ability to merge individual LGPS funds and councils that aren't complying. So that's the kind of the stick to make things get done. And then equally, there's a similar dynamic with the pools. So 8 have gone to 6. The message to the pools is 6 needs to deliver on what we're outlining, or there may be further mergers or drop-offs further down the line. So I agree with Phil. There's not much more to say apart from that it's going to be a big step change in how LGPS funds across the land operate.
And I would highlight, as Phil mentioned, not everybody necessarily has taken it on board, but these are some pretty strong powers that are being created, and those powers really do give government pretty much free rein over telling the LGPS what to do. And if we think there's been quite a bit of backwards and forwards over the last at least 10 or 15 years on the interaction between fiduciary duty and legislation and guidance and what can be done here and there. I mean, we're moving to a world where lots of that goes out the window, and the government can just tell the fund what to do, and that's kind of interesting because powers once created the one thing you can say is it will be used. Whether that's this government or the next. So it doesn't seem there's much anyone can do about it, but it's worth just recognising that that's the direction of travel. Short and medium term, I'm pretty confident that the pooling organisations and certainly the London CIV that we deal with are approaching this change with a collaborative and positive mindset. And so the engagement that as Phil mentions, I think will absolutely happen, and for the foreseeable future, the LGPS can continue to. We're not changing all of the people, and we're not getting to a point where no one cares about members. So that's all very positive. I think the longer term picture is a bit more cloudy. There are some. It's probably less detail, but it's certainly still in there. Some substantial governance changes around appointment and creation of a role within the administering authority of the senior LGPS officer. That changes the way the governance works in terms of oversight of the relationship between the authority, administering authority, and the pool, and those sorts of things, which. Very little detail really in there at the moment, so we probably want to see some more what that's going to look like in the final outcome, because we're getting to a point where there's pretty limited opportunity to influence what the investments look like.
I had two practical questions. So first, on the closure of the two funds, do we have any intelligence about where those 21 LGPS are likely to end up? Is there the suggestion of a London Civ Plus taking on additional regions? Does that present a risk, a dilution of our influence? Second question is, and I suspect I know the answer, that this needs to be dictated within the upcoming regulations, but we've touched on it several times that the legislation requires the pools to reflect the preferences of individual LGPS. Do we have any indication of what that mechanism, how that may be structured or work in practice? So first, the consolidation of the pools, and then second, the mechanism.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, when the initial pools were formed, the analogy was dance cards. Funds were running around the country looking for dance partners, and it mostly, the pools that were formed mostly depended on geographical location. Apart from Border to Coast, which was my authority in Surrey, where I didn't think we could form an effective partnership with Access, so I looked to the north and I formed an alliance with Cumbria and East Riding of Yorkshire. Those were the first three funds in Border to Coast, so there's the triangle from north to south, and then we soaked up another 9 funds in between. So all of those funds are dotted around the country, so that was the only non-geographical solution that was offered, and Border to Coast is now one of the best performing pools. The government has made clear that in terms of the 21 without a home, only 3 pools really have any prospect of offering any of those 21 a home. So those 3 are Border to Coast, LGPS Central, and LPP, which is Local Pensions Partnership. So the government has made clear that it doesn't really see a home in any of the other 3 pools. I know London Civ have had some conversations with some of the 21, but there's quite a tight timetable on this. I think there has to be some indication of what's going on by 30th of June, and then they're required to have a permanent solution by 30th of September.
And yeah, I recognise that you said that it's highly unlikely that they will form part of the London Civ, but are there any risks or opportunities that would be related to them if they were?
I mean, really, if you've got 32 London boroughs in terms of the political makeup of London, it doesn't really make sense to take on a county. So I can't really see that happening. In terms of your question about the preferences of the client funds within a pool, I'm quite confident in terms of the pool, London Civ pool management. and the good communication links that we have with the chief executive and the other senior managers within the pool, there are good lines of communication, and I don't really see any problem of them going out on a limb and working against us. I'd take Sam's viewpoint on that if it was possible. Sam, are you in line with that thinking, really?
Yes, I think so. I might just add to the first point, the first question. As I understand it, the governance of each of the pools is, and including the CIV, in order to accept a new fund into the pool, the current shareholders would need to agree that. So it's something that would certainly be on your desk very, very sort of promptly if they were going to even consider that. So there's a sort of a safeguard against risks. I think the opportunity side of it, one could argue that additional scale is not harmful in a world where there's an awful lot of focus on bigger is better and to some degree political sort of the chances of a politician coming back to revisit this again in future, having gone from 8 to 6, you could argue they may well say, "Oh, why aren't we 4 or 3 or 2?" At which point, additional scale, of course, is better than bigger. Going to be better than smaller because you'd be viewed as someone who will accept rather than be pushed. But I think the point that Phil raises about sort of the fit of a county coming into a group of boroughs is not, it just means it's not going to be a huge priority. And I think from a CIV's perspective, they've got a lot to do to deliver on all of the new services that they are going to be required to do in terms of strategic advice and oversight of legacy assets and all of those sorts of things. So I don't think that would be a priority for them.
Extremely helpful, thank you. Just to just dive a little bit deeper on the mechanism, so we can anticipate as a committee that the CIV will propose allocations for us to then review, consider, and share a view.
So they're in the middle of drawing up plans to take on our existing legacy assets. And then in terms of how that forms part of their future plans, we will hear of those in due course. Yeah.
So we should look forward to more visits from our friends from the London CIV. Excellent. Thank you for giving us that deep dive. Are there further points that you wish to raise on this one?
Only the point Sam raised about having a senior officer in charge of everything. At the moment, with the tri-borough arrangement, my responsibility is for 4 funds, which is the investment and the governance of getting reports to you on the committee cycle, closure of accounts, the actuarial evaluation. That's all my responsibility. I don't have any responsibilities for admin, but the proposal is that a senior officer should have the full encompassing authority over everything.
Are we concluded then with item 12, or are there any further questions or observations? No?
Sorry.
Please, Laura.
It's probably not necessarily for tonight, but just in due course, I'd just be interested to understand really the changes really for us as a committee as the legislation proceeds and we head towards April next year, and what it means in terms of our role and our decision making. I know it's going to be vastly reduced, but it'd be interesting to understand that more fully in due course.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with a draft bill making its way through the House or the Houses, we will have a clearer indication once the final royal assent is achieved, and then obviously further clarification on the regulations when they're published. So we will update the committee as and when we get to those stages.
Thank you.
And can I second that suggestion of perhaps a training session prior to a future meeting to take us through the provisions as they develop? Excellent. Then can I ask members to note the report? Excellent. Well, then I think that brings us into the station. I would like, Liam, if you wouldn't mind to minute, particular thanks to all officers for their assistance preparing for this slightly unusual meeting today. For in particular for James giving up his evening to join us, and Kassari, and most especially to security colleagues for 145 King Street for their support. It's been a very reassuring presence.